Here are the fantasy follows, top 5 players to target on the waiver wire for week 10 of fantasy football. The top player to target on this week's waiver wire is Curtis Samuel for the Carolina Panthers. Samuel currently rostered in 30% of all leagues. Now, last week for Samuel, it was 9 targets, 9 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown against the Chiefs. That was 26.8 fantasy points. He has gone for 17 or more fantasy points each of his last 3 games. Now, the run of upcoming games for Samuel, the next 4, playing Tampa Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, and then a bye. Tampa Bay allowing the 24th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot, so 9th fewest, but then Detroit 13th most, and then Minnesota 2nd most to the wide receiver position. So a decent run of games, not a great next game, but Curtis Samuel has proven his worth within that offense in Carolina. Look for him to continue that. The rest of the top 5, number 2, Jalen Reagor, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. I love Reagor as a sneaky pickup, currently rostered in 24% of all leagues. Now, the rookie has spent most of this year injured, and last week they were on a bye, so he may fall beneath most fantasy players' radar at this point. But in his last game, Week 8 versus Dallas, 13.2 fantasy points, 1 touchdown. That was his first game back from injury, and he had the bye week to work his way back in the offense in Philadelphia. They need wide receivers. They've been banged up. Number 3, it's Wayne Gallman for the New York Giants, currently rostered in 25% of all leagues. Gallman has quietly taken the lead in the backfield in New York. Last week, 14 rushes, 68 yards, 1 touchdown, adding a catch for 9 yards. That was 14.7 fantasy points against Washington. He has had 13 or more and a touchdown each of his last 3 games. Number 4 is J.D. McKissic for Washington, currently rostered in 24% of all leagues. Last week for McKissic, only 3 rushes, 17 yards, but 14 targets, 9 catches, 65 yards. That was 17.2 fantasy points versus New York. Alex Smith, as a quarterback, has loved to throw it to J.D. McKissic. His run of the next 4 games, a nice run. Detroit, Cincinnati, Dallas, then Pittsburgh. The Lions allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to the running back spot. Cincinnati 13, Dallas 11, Pittsburgh at 30, so the 3rd fewest. But a nice couple of games for J.D. McKissic. And number 5, it's Jacoby Myers for the New England Patriots. Cam Newton has been looking to Myers. Last game, 14 targets, 12 catches for a big 169 yards. That was 28.90 fantasy points. He's seen 24 targets in his last 2 games. With N'Keal Harry, Newton has been turning to him. And the run of games for Myers, not quite as great. Baltimore, Houston, Arizona, and the Chargers. Baltimore, the 25th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, so the 8th fewest. But then Houston, the 7th most, Arizona 18, and the Chargers 21. So especially as long as Harry remains injured, Myers a big spot in that offense. And here's some bonus names for this week. Starting off with Austin Hooper, tight end for the Cleveland Browns. Last week they were on a bye, and before that, Hooper was out to injury, but he did return to practice. And in his last 3 games that he played, he's seen 6 or more targets in all 3. And now with no Odell Beckham in Cleveland, a possible upgrade in workload there. Hooper currently rostered in 41% of all leagues, and his next 4 games, a nice run. Houston, Philadelphia, then Jacksonville, and then Tennessee. Houston allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. Philadelphia the 5th, Jacksonville the 3rd, and Tennessee right in the middle at 16th. Allen Lazard, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, another player like Reagor. He has not been playing. He's been out for injury for quite some time, but he is expected to return, if not this week, soon. He has seen 18 or more fantasy points in 2 of the 3 games that he did play this year. And the next 4 for Lazard, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Chicago, and then Philadelphia. Jacksonville, the 15th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Indianapolis, 16. Chicago, 30, so the 3rd fewest. And Philadelphia at 20. But again, this is a player with tremendous upside if he comes back into that offense and performs well. Tua Tagovailoa, an interesting one here, quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, currently rostered in 24% of all leagues. Now, he may not be at a spot where he is a starter in standard leagues with 1 quarterback right now, but keep an eye on this player. Last week, 21.42 fantasy points, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, adding 35 rushing yards. The biggest reason to keep an eye on Tua, his run of games is fantastic. The next 4, the Chargers, Denver, the Jets, and then Cincinnati. LA giving up the 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Denver the 10th, the Jets the 7th, and Cincinnati the 14th. If he is going to turn it on this year, he has an opportunity to do so. And Duke Johnson, the running back for the Houston Texans, currently rostered in 16% of all leagues. Now, the key to Duke Johnson is the status of David Johnson, who left last game with an injury. He may be back or may not. He's in the concussion protocol. Last week for Duke Johnson, 16 rushes, 41 yards, and a touchdown, along with 4 targets for 4 catches, 32 yards. That was 15.3 fantasy points at Jacksonville. The run of games for Houston, it is Cleveland, New England, then Detroit, then Indianapolis. Cleveland allowing the 19th most fantasy points to the running back spot, so just in the bottom half. New England at 8, Detroit at 2, and the Colts at 29, so the 4th fewest. Probably only going to be a 1-week start, if that, for Johnson, but still a player that could help your team this week. Be sure to join us this Sunday and every Sunday for the TFF Live Sunday pregame show. Streaming live right here on our YouTube channel at 12 noon and taking you right up until game time, answering all your fantasy football questions and getting you ready for your matchups each week. And here's where you can find us, the Fantasy Follow. We are a brand new YouTube channel, so we appreciate you watching our videos. Please subscribe and make sure you get those notifications for whenever we have new content. And also, we have a goal of 100 new subscribers, so please help us reach that goal. You can also find us on Twitter at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. And don't forget, you can send us your fantasy football questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we will answer those questions live on our Sunday pregame show. Facebook / The Fantasy Follow, and our website, thefantasyfollow.com.